There are marketing budgets and there are thoughtful marketing budgets. What's the difference? Well, it's the thought that you put in. Not every marketing tactic works for every situation, and even appropriately chosen marketing tactics need to be executed well. My guest today helps dental practices build thoughtful marketing plans and budgets, and he's going to tell us what he thinks about all of this. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. That's usually what they want anyway. But let's face it, care is better when the provider owns the practice because they get to make all the clinical decisions, all the business decisions. Sometimes they integrate, sometimes they relate to each other, and they can be made first and foremost with the patient in mind and what's best for the private practice. It's not always the same when somebody else gets involved. Different agendas can creep in. Let's just keep it simple and keep it private. My guest today is Jake Goetz. Since 2003, Jake has given group seminars and training on sales and marketing. He's a key opinion leader for various dental marketing companies. Since 2013, Jake has personally consulted more than 5,600 dentists nationwide on their marketing strategies and sales skills to reduce unnecessary spend while increasing collections. Jake founded GOAT Dental Marketing Consultants, that's GOAT, in early 2023, providing marketing strategy and sales coaching for dental offices across the country. Jake, with his wife and two daughters, enjoy living and playing in the mountains of northern Utah, which is where they are right now. A returning guest, Jake. Jake, thanks for coming back to Practice Care.
Always, Carl. I could talk with you all day long, so we'll keep it short and
Well, I
sweet.
know we say bite-sized advice. We have to police ourselves because we get to
Yeah,
talk about marketing, one of my favorite topics also. Before we get there, every episode starts the same way. The bio kind of hit the essentials, but there's more to you. So tell us a bit more about you.
yeah. So a couple of years ago, after a decade in the dental industry and about 20 years in sales, I graduated in professional sales. And I've always kind of coached and grown sales teams. And I got into marketing because I wanted to simplify the sales process by
Yeah.
creating a better story during the marketing. So over the last couple of years, I've been focusing a lot on that for my clients.
Hmm.
And I work with a lot of agencies like yours, and
Hmm.
really, our goal is to try and tell a better story. And lately, since I was last on your show, I've been re-listening to some revised copies of some of my favorite marketing books,
Hmm.
and part of that in preparation for today, talking a little bit about a thoughtful marketing plan and being
Hmm.
more thoughtful in your budget.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's been a really fun journey because the world of marketing is always changing, and I think that's why I enjoy it so much. But at the
Hmm.
same time, that's why so many small business and private practice owners get frustrated with marketing,
Hmm.
is because it changes so often. So
Hmm.
um, I love a challenge, and I love not having to do the same thing twice, and being
Hmm.
creative. And
Yeah.
I think that's why sales and marketing has always just been like my lifeblood. It's just this joyful thing for me.
Yeah. And where the blood meets, I mean, it's probably pretty tumultuous. I come from that too. I was in marketing teams and we supported sales teams, and sometimes we got along well and sometimes we didn't. And you're not giving me what I need and vice versa. So you're trying to marry the two. God bless the cause.
Right?
God bless the cause. So, all right, let's get into it. It's just about creating a thoughtful marketing budget. Listener, you're going to hear us a couple points. First, you're going to hear us use the word plan and budget interchangeably. Not exactly interchangeable, but you really can't have a thoughtful budget until you have a thoughtful plan. So if you hear us, it's not us being clumsy. It's really there. One follows the other. The other point just to make is while Jake spends his days with dental practices in the world of dental, what we're talking about is not dental only. It really does apply, to any practice of any kind. So with that, let's just start, peeling this onion apart. The core elements of a thoughtful marketing budget. What would you say they are?
First, to your point, you have to put a lot of thought into your plan, and
Hmm.
the budget will evolve. Sometimes you come to it. I have a client in Florida that for a year we were trying to establish a budget, but the reality was the plan was changing,
Hmm.
and we were having a hard time establishing the budget because the plan was never established.
Hmm.
And so, as the plan started to come together, I asked the question again, what should our budget be now that it's coming into shape? And he just kept saying, Jake, stop asking me about the budget. The plan will dictate the budget. If the plan is working, we will spend whatever it takes. And I thought, I love that you're so flexible and so willing to invest in this. Like, he understood the core principle
Hmm.
that a good plan will justify whatever the budget is as we
Hmm.
continue and it shows growth.
Hmm.
Um, but that's a really hard thing to manage too as a marketing manager and
Hmm.
as a fractional CMO like my firm, because you don't know until the doctor says, "Why'd you spend so much?" that you spent too much if you don't have
Yeah.
it. And so, I had to uh, stay disciplined, but it was almost overly conservative in his mind. So I think part of a thoughtful budget
Hmm.
is an open dialogue with whoever your marketing agency or your
Yeah.
marketing manager is. So that's the first thing is I think
Yeah.
you can establish I used to be a river guide when I was in high school. I would do whitewater rafting, river guiding.
Hmm.
And we used to talk all the time about, look, the flow of the river will stay within the banks of the river.
Hmm.
So the guidelines and really, as long as you stay in the banks of the river, you can navigate and decide which rapids to hit. And
Right.
we give you cautionary warning signs and teach you what to look for if that rapid is unsafe.
Hmm.
It's kind of the same thing in a thoughtful marketing plan
Hmm.
and establishing a thoughtful budget. You need to know what are the absolute, like, danger pitfalls that we
Yeah.
have to avoid.
Hmm.
And if you can identify that first by having a dialogue saying, okay, what didn't work,
Hmm.
what have you tried that did not work,
Hmm.
then you can say, okay, this is my short list of the things, or maybe long list of the things we've tried that did not work.
Yeah.
And then at the same time you can say, but if we're going to go down another line of approach,
Yeah.
was there a reason why those things that are in the did not work list didn't work? Because maybe we were failing to do some of the new items.
Right.
And are there things we can now incorporate that, even though they didn't work in the past, they
Hmm.
will work today because you have a new budget, or because now it's a new mix in your approach? Because you
Hmm.
and I know marketing mix oftentimes dictates if your social media is going to work better than if
Hmm.
if you have new components of your marketing mix that you did not have before.
Right.
So a thoughtful budget in my mind is very much knowing first and foremost, okay, what do I need?
Hmm.
You define your needs,
Hmm.
and it could be as simple as I need 10 more new patients per month.
Right.
And if that's the need,
Hmm.
now let's work that backwards.
Hmm.
And people talk about setting goals and working it backwards all the time, but I think for the listeners to understand how you establish that, really, there's, like they say, there's many ways to skin a cat,
Hmm.
right? It just comes down to, what have you tried? Let's learn from that data, and let's
Right.
make educated decisions to establish a new plan.
Yeah.
I was at an event. I have to share this because it was way powerful. There was a VP of digital marketing agency that was presenting, and he said, "We're gonna start with everybody taking out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down a number." And he said, "I want you to write down, how many new patients do you want?" And so everybody wrote down, "Okay, I want this." He goes,
Hmm.
"Great. Now, if you were to give me a marketing budget to get to that number, what would the marketing dollar amount be?" So write another number. What is the marketing dollar?
Hmm.
And then he asked everybody in the room. There were only about 20 of us.
Okay.
He asked everybody in the room, okay, how many patients did you need for your practice per month more? And somebody gave a number, 20, someone gave a number, 10, someone, and he
Right.
went through and he went back and he goes, okay, how much do you think it needs? How much do you think it needs?
Hmm.
And he goes, the reality is it's different because there's different variables in every one of your individual markets. We had come together from 15 different states,
Hmm.
and some were very rural and some were very, very, big cities. And
Right.
it was interesting to see that in some of those doctors' minds and in some of those marketing directors' minds, they thought, oh, I need $120 per new patient. And others were saying, I need $2,200 per new patient,
Hmm.
because it came down to the questions of what type of patients are we going after?
Right.
That's gonna be very different if I'm going after a full arch surgical procedure patient who
Hmm.
needs an entire new set of teeth compared to, oh, I just need new patients who need a cleaning.
Right.
And so without knowing the details, you can't really establish a thoughtful budget.
So the first piece, because you're right, the first step one of a thoughtful budget and frankly a thoughtful plan is a goal, because a marketing plan and budget responds to a goal. Otherwise, it's just guessing. And it's just, guessing rarely, even if you guess right, you didn't really know it because you only guessed it. You're just never going to know. So, what types of patients, over what period of time? And if you're not sure, pick a number and then just, we would say, learn your way into it. Was that too much or too little? Um, Make sure you could service them if you got them, but you need a goal. You absolutely need a goal. Yeah. Okay. And then another part of what you said is, what's my local market reality, which is kind of a vague way to say it. How much competition do I have? Um, what do things cost in my area? These are realities that you're gonna, you can map out how many competitors, because guess what? They're all going for the same patients you are. And some
Right.
are going to do it better than others, and they're not sitting still. And that matters. That matters. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to spend more than them, but this is a very unsatisfying way. So you have to be more effective than them. And we can get into what that looks like. But these things matter. And so step one, got to have a goal. Sounds obvious to say. I can tell you, when I talk to a lot of prospective clients, how much growth do you need? I'm not sure. You willing to pick something? I mean, are you willing to pick something? Or they get flustered with, well, we have so many different types of patients. Fair enough. Fair. I get that. Let's pick some sort of average number and make it low. Burden it low so that it's harder for us, because at least it's more conservative. But you got to pick something. You
Yeah.
know, you got to pick. If you were going to interview somebody for a job and they said, "What does this pay?" I don't know. They're not going to stay around. Like, you have to pick something. You just do. Um, so that's the first part. So let's keep going. Other core elements. What do you think? So this, now they've picked a goal, at least something to work with. Then what?
Then it's identifying your target audience,
Mhm.
right? Like you said, it's
Is
it's
that all people with teeth, if we're talking about a dentist?
not at all in the dental
No.
space. It's, are you accepting Medicaid and Medicare? Are you in network with most insurances, or are you strictly a cash-based practice
Hmm.
and needing to go after fee-for-service non-insured?
Hmm.
And so knowing your demographic and analyzing your patient data,
Hmm.
we do an amazing job because of HIPAA at protecting our patient data.
Hmm.
We do a horrible job at analyzing it and
Hmm.
making it actionable data.
Hmm.
So put some thought into that.
Hmm.
Run a sociometric analysis of your patient data. If you don't know how, send it to me. I'll run it for you for
Hmm.
free. If you're
Okay.
listening to this show, Carl, that's my gift to your
Done.
group. If anyone wants me to do an analysis to pull their patient personas, where their patients are coming from, where their money is coming from in their
Hmm.
community,
Hmm.
and make sense of the type of messaging that your marketing campaigns should have to speak the language of those patients.
Hmm.
Once we know who they are, we have a proprietary tool that we do for private practice that we took from a massive e-commerce analysis software tool that basically scrubs all of your patients' names and addresses against the credit bureaus. And it compared it to the national footprint. And
Wow.
the reality is, private practice, national footprint comparison doesn't really do you any good,
Okay.
because in private practice, where are your patients coming from? Within direct vicinity of your practice. Someone
Right.
in, deep South, Louisiana
Hmm.
versus Seattle, Washington are not going to respond to the same messages.
Right. Right.
So we run a comparative analysis that's proprietary to my team that we
Hmm.
designed, that allows us to compare all of the credit bureau consumer purchasing spending habits and behaviors on 189 data points,
Wow.
interest levels, and we compare that to the non-patients who live within a quarter mile of your established patients. So it shows us what your patient's neighbors are currently spending money on and not spending money on. So now you can speak their language of layers of interest, audience demographic targeting within social platforms and profiles, keywords that are more relevant in your community versus the national footprint. And it used to take us 2 weeks to do this, and we would charge $2,500
Mhm.
because it was a beast of a project for every client.
Yeah.
We now literally, I do it for free anywhere that I speak because it's so valuable. And because of this new software that we've designed, it takes us 20 minutes.
Wow.
So it is and I'll do a quick 15-minute phone call with you to teach you how to read the data.
Mhm.
Or if I'm not available, if I'm on the road, one of my assistants or one of my other consultants can step on and give you that overview. It's
Okay.
really, really beneficial, but
Right.
that's step two. I think you have the goal, but
Mhm.
then learn your data
Mhm.
so that you can customize your message.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and by doing that, you're also doing something that a lot of people don't think about, but it shows you where to display your ads, where to
Mhm.
mail a brochure or a postcard, what
Mhm.
type of communication to send out. So that in and of itself gives you a thoughtful budget because you're not
Yep.
going to spend money displaying your ads to audiences that are not going to convert into a new
Correct.
patient.
Correct. Which leads to the next stage. I'll see if you tell me if I'm wrong or not. So now let's just now you're going to start mailing stuff. I think the next stage is, so what do we put on that? What do we say to people? What's our message? And when I hear that, I think, what's different about us? If I could sit down with them and I had 30 seconds, I need to be able to say, you should choose us because. What's the
Yes.
because? Is that right? I mean, would you
Yeah.
agree? Yeah.
Back when I was really young in sales, I was actually going to school at Weber State University in the professional sales program, and I was selling timeshare at the time.
Hmm.
And some of the best sales training and verbiage training you'll ever get. I mean, you're
Hmm.
asking people for 70, 80,000 bucks in 90 minutes.
Hmm.
And we learned really quickly that there were certain things that you asked and certain things that you didn't ask. And there were certain ways that you had to make it unique. And so we had a training once that I have applied in every industry since I had that training.
Okay.
And it is, what are your 5 whys? And in
Hmm.
that industry, it was why vacation, because we were selling vacation packages,
Hmm.
why vacation ownership, why a
Hmm.
timeshare instead of just renting from a hotel,
Hmm.
why that particular company, why this brand that I represent,
Hmm.
and why now,
Yep.
and why not.
Hmm.
If you could answer those 5 questions in your approach,
Hmm.
then it allowed people to make a self-discovery if they were reading and hearing you in your presentation of your value to the
Yep.
world, your
Yep.
proposition. It allowed them to make a self-discovery and make an educated decision instead of being sold something that, because no one wants to be sold. Everybody loves to buy things, but no one wants
Yep.
to be sold anything.
Yep.
And so your job is to be a guide.
Hmm.
And if you're a good guide, and the book that I started reading since we had this last episode is Brand Story 2.0
Okay.
by Donald Miller.
Hmm.
It's the revised version and it's dynamite. He
Hmm.
uses examples at the beginning of 2025 that are very, very relevant today. So I'd recommend
Hmm.
people to listen to that book because it talks about get out of your own way as a practitioner.
Hmm.
Stop thinking you're the hero in someone else's story. We
Nope.
all want to be a hero in our own story. So how do you become a guide
Yeah.
as an authoritative figure, a doctor? How are you a guide to help them become a hero in their own story with the healing that they are seeking?
Yeah. And the 5 whys, right? You're helping people just figure out, are you a good choice for me or not? And enough times you are, but sometimes people don't choose you anyway. There's some reasons, but in this case, it's because they're just not sure because they haven't answered all those whys. You haven't helped them, you know, you haven't helped them do that. And then they'll come to that choice. And frankly, the faster you can get them to that choice, the faster you're going to grow because more people will figure out, oh, it's you. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Well, they use an example in that book where it's they try to sell annual memberships and passes to a local aquarium, and they couldn't. Parents weren't buying these passes to the aquarium ever, and their sales were just abysmal, right?
Hmm.
And so they said, "All right, well, what can we change?" And they went through the story map, and they
Hmm.
said, "Okay, what is it?" And they heard somebody say, "Oh man, kids love aquariums." and a light bulb went on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they said, that's it. We're taking away everything off the website, everything off the billboard. All it's going to be is a picture of a kid standing in front of a massive aquarium in our building.
Mm-hmm.
And our whole ad campaign is going to be kids love aquariums. Just by changing their message,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they started to get orders without people calling in, without a sales team needing to do it. People
Right.
self-subscribed because they said, well, if kids love aquariums, I want to be a good parent and I want to provide the best for my kids.
Right.
And I want to give them something they love.
Right.
Sales took care of themselves.
Yeah.
And so, what is it that you provide? And
Mm-hmm.
I've started doing this with some of my clients that are doing, $50,000 double arch, complete smile makeovers,
Mm-hmm.
where people go, oh my goodness, that's so expensive. Well, compared to what?
Mm-hmm.
Compared to a horrible quality of life?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the cost of a car. Yeah, a car that breaks down that you're replacing in a few years. What if you have an amazing smile that
Yeah.
we can provide you, and it changes your whole quality of life in
Yeah.
so many more ways than just driving down a road, but
And
actually mitigating your future.
what I like about that was a different context, but I was talking with somebody this morning where person X was thought this was expensive. Doesn't matter what, oh, that's really expensive. Well, really, they don't have any experience buying that. So they don't know really if that's expensive or not. They weren't framing it as what do I get for what I'm paying, just kind of like you were saying. Um, $50,000. Well, if you walk into certain car dealerships, oh, that's fine, of course. Why would I even question that? Well, you won't gotta question it because that's what you expected, right?
Right.
Whereas this is, so if you try to compare the $50,000 total smile makeover with other things that it's not going to help. Why would I compare that to a car? Like in my mind. Instead,
Right.
it's what am I getting for this?
That's it. It's
What am I getting for this? And you're going to have to decide if that's worth 50 grand or not. But this is what you're getting, you know?
yes.
Yeah.
And that's the story is,
Hmm.
oftentimes you'll see advertisements that I think have been overused in the dental space that say, chew the foods you love again. Right.
Hmm.
And that's a good ad, but it's
Hmm.
overused. So how do we refresh the ad with the same outcome of a desire?
Hmm.
And in my mind, a thoughtful campaign, a thoughtful budget
Hmm.
is really coming down to, is what we're about to do going to engage an audience?
Hmm.
Is it going, number one, does it engage?
Hmm.
Number two, does it educate them in what it is that you're providing?
Hmm.
Number three, is it presented in a way that allows them to feel persuaded naturally?
Hmm.
They are making the self-discovery and feeling and building the value in their own mind.
Hmm.
So three is persuasion, and
Hmm.
four, do we have an invitation for them to act in our favor?
Right. And where
If
do you fit? What if more people than just you offer the same service? So how do you differentiate?
Yeah,
Is
it that's where the credibility and the logic come in. But
Mhm.
at the same time, the engagement. If you're not engaging in a way that is unique to you, going back
Mhm.
to your question, what makes you unique?
Mhm.
A lot of dental offices, the tagline is, "Oh, we treat our patients like family." Well, guess
Right.
what?
So is everybody.
You're in healthcare. Everybody should.
And even if you don't, nobody can tell. Even if you're great at it,
Yeah.
nobody can tell.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to say
So,
that. So
yeah, you're
you can't even
supposed to say that.
verify it. You can't even verify it. Yeah.
So that's where, how do you differentiate yourself? To me, that's part of the journey.
Hmm.
That's part of the uniqueness of the relationship.
Hmm.
And so how do you articulate that? That's where things like Google reviews can be extra valuable,
Right.
and testimonials and
Hmm.
videos of the patient being the hero of their own story.
Hmm.
I had one client that they recorded a testimonial that, I mean, it makes people cry every time they see it, because
Hmm.
it's a gentleman who was 32 years old. He never took care of himself, got into drugs and as a teenager, and his mouth was blown up from meth.
Hmm.
Was in complete recovery mode and realized, I'm never going to be taken seriously if I don't fix this.
Hmm.
So he went out, busted his tail for a year to get his credit score good enough to qualify to pay for a $50,000 smile makeover with this dentist.
Hmm.
He did it, and then he tells his story in a 2-minute testimonial where he says, I needed to invest in my future because I
Hmm.
had a lot of life left to live, but nobody believed in me but me.
Wow.
And so he said, I've now landed my dream career. I've
Hmm.
married an amazing woman who has accepted me for who I am. She got past the prejudgment of what my smile used to be because I had a beautiful new smile.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do this, anyone can.
Mm-hmm.
That campaign crushed it
Yeah.
because it wasn't about Dr. Jones,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or whatever the doctor's name was. It
Right.
was about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I feel like a thoughtful budget, like that campaign, yeah, it cost the doctor $3,000 to do a professional photo shoot, to have him come in, do the cutting. And, by the time it was said and done and we promoted that advertisement,
Mm-hmm.
$7,000 campaign the first month, and then it was about 3,500 a month every month after that we ran it.
Mm-hmm.
But he landed $50,000 cases off of it over the course of the next 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sounds obvious. Sounds like the
pretty
kind of
darn
thing
good.
you'd say, why would, damn, I should have done that at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to just kind of summarize where we are and make a point. So uh budget and plan. So budget, what you need a goal, you need a target audience, you need a clear message, you need to include why you're different, and you need a way to engage. These are all, this is a plan. So listener, we haven't gone to market with anything yet, right? We're creating a plan, something that you write down, something that I tell my clients when we go down this path. I just want to say it right now. It's a report. It's a really important report, but just get ready. The day we go, aha, there it is not the day anybody comes into the office because of it yet. We haven't gone to market with it. But if you don't do this, then anything that you do to start promoting could work. But you're going to be wondering that $3,500 a month is going to feel pricey, whereas maybe it shouldn't. There's just, because what you're lacking without the planning is the confidence, right? I mean, whether you're in dental or medical or whatever, what do you give a patient who needs a lot of work done? A treatment plan. On the
Right.
day you deliver the plan, is that the day they're better? No, it's the same thing. You've got to go through the planning first. And part of the planning is choosing what's going to work, what's not going to work, how things, which we're going to get into next. Jake brought up an example, really interesting example of, we know where to place ads. Well, part of placing ads is knowing how ads work more than just how to place them, right? I've run into people who said, we tried that. Well, how'd you do it? Well, they did it in a way that was never going to work. So part of what goes into the budget is an appropriate amount of spend so that tactic X is allowed to work the way it's designed, the way it can. But that's the next part of what we're going to talk about. So phase one is, you got to have a plan, right? And these are the core elements of the plan. And if you don't have them, you're not doing marketing, you're promoting. And I know that sounds anal, but it's a big deal difference. Anybody can promote. Advertising and promotion. You can start right now, listener. Google will let you open up an account. Facebook will take your money to start throwing ads out there.
They'll give you money to start.
And they'll give you money to start because they know. And you know what? Off you go. That's advertising and promotion. Marketing is different. Marketing is about serving a market. Jake's talking about defining the market, what they need, how to say it in an authentically compelling way, who they are, and conceptualizing the budget behind it. So I'll get off my soapbox. How do you pick the tactical stuff to go into the plan? Because that's what drives a budget.
Yeah. Knowing your levers is a big next step, because sometimes people, they'll spread too wide of a net that there's not enough money in any particular bucket. And so they'll say, oh, I need some Google ads. I need some Facebook and Instagram ads. I want to run a TikTok. I want to run a Bing ad. I want to run a Nextdoor ad. I want to run
SEO like crazy. I want to do all these things. Yeah.
And before you know it, that $3,500 a month is 250 here, 100 there, 500 there, and 2,000 there. And you go, well, that's not enough for any one given channel to actually perform.
Correct.
So thoughtful budgeting also comes into, where do we put that money and how much is each of those locations going to cost me?
Correct.
And I think that is one of the biggest oversights, is that they say, well, I gave you $5,000. And going back to the example I shared of this one that got 15 full arch cases at $50,000 a pop. And well, I should say 15 full arches, 22,000 per arch. Some were getting double arches.
Okay, fair enough.
So, but still, right?
Yeah.
So you look at that campaign, that client did not actually make a dime until they had put out almost $14,000 because they had the edits, running
Mhm.
the ads to get through the learning algorithm.
Mhm.
And then the funnels started to fill up and the leads
Mhm.
they came in for a consult, and then they started to close and
Right.
successfully get people to start treatment.
Right.
So they were, 2, 3 months before the first dollars came back to them.
Yeah.
And they could have very easily pulled the plug on that.
Mhm.
But part of the strategy is knowing, we were putting 3,500 a month, where 2,000 of it in this particular market,
Mhm.
2,000 of it was going to social media,
Mhm.
and 1,500 of it was going to Google ads that were keywords associated with the Facebook creative ad,
Mhm.
and a landing page that covered the education component,
Right.
the invitation to act.
Right.
So we had the engage and the beginning of education at the
Mhm.
very, surface, that was more of a learn more invitation that took them to an
Yeah.
education page, and then a persuasion of almost the duh factor. I
Right.
call it the keep it stupid simple, right?
Keep it simple. So yeah, the KISS
Yeah.
principle. Yes. Keep it
And
simple,
so
stupid. Yeah.
keep it simple, stupid is it was like, oh, well, yeah, that's a no brainer. A denture is what I've been putting up with, or a bridge was what I was putting up with. I really need
Mhm.
implants. I really need a bigger solution than what I've been putting on band aids to a
Yeah.
person for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And so as we went through that, that's where we started to understand the 3,500 needed to not be spread out with 2,500 to a direct mail campaign
Mhm.
and 100 on Google and 100 on Facebook or
Yeah.
whatever. It
Yeah.
was just not enough.
Yeah.
We knew from doing competitive landscape analysis how much the keywords were going to cost
Mhm.
to get us enough leads
Mhm.
to know what our conversion rates were and how well the phone team was answering and
Yeah.
converting
Yeah.
appointments, and how well the doctor was getting
Right.
people to
So
say
there's
yes.
so there's two components there about how things work. So you've got your plan now, now you're ready to go to market with it. There's two different entities about how things work. First is people. How do people learn about something new? Right? You're going to hear listener buyer's journey. I frankly hate that term, although it's accurate because it's very large and vague and kind of abstract. It's just the steps of somebody who never heard about you or what you offer down to, you know what, they're right. I've got this problem and I want to solve it with them. To me, those are just kind of more simpler, concrete steps. How people learn. They don't necessarily call you the first time they hear about you, right? It takes repetition. The other part is how do the tools work? So whether it's direct mail or Facebook ads or whatever it is, how do they work? What kind of time do they take to react? What type of how do they work? And both of them need to be working well together. They take whatever time they take and whatever budget they require. And in some cases, it is true. If you put more money to it, you can make time go faster. And in some cases, you can't too much. And there's a point at which it doesn't, there's diminishing returns. But if you don't, so when Jake was talking about, 150 here, 120 there, whatever, that was divorced from the reality of what those things take to have the effect you want them to have. So the other part of a budget is you just have to accept what it takes to make these things work.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you'll notice that your Google ads, maybe there's not enough search volume
Mm-hmm.
for what you're going after.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's limited, really limited search volume in a particular platform such as Google,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe you need to do something else like a radio spot
Yeah.
or a
Mm-hmm.
billboard to drive people, that drives curiosity for someone to
Mm-hmm.
say, that's a picture of a missing tooth on the billboard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a word I'm not familiar with. What's a zygomatic implant?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that people aren't searching that term. And so you
Mm-hmm.
drive your audience in your market to
Mm-hmm.
search for a key term that's less competitive.
Right.
So maybe you run a billboard that drives awareness and education about something that you want people to learn about that
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows if they're not a
Mm-hmm.
clinician.
Yeah.
And
And they
so
can work and they can, but that's a strategy right there.
that's a strategy.
It's got a logic that works. And you know what? If you find it's not working, you can stop it, but at least it made sense. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and part of, they call it practicing medicine because you don't have all the answers as a clinician.
Mhm.
Marketing, I wish that more people called it
Practice of
practicing
yeah,
marketing,
yeah.
because every market has so many variables. Every
Mhm.
campaign has so many variables that you have to give it time.
Mhm.
I have a practice I'm familiar with that has been spending a lot of money the last couple of months on a completely new campaign they had never marketed for. They had no brand awareness. They had no patient base that was established to go off of. They gave it 3 weeks and said, "Oh, it's not working. I'm done." And I'm like, "Whoa, you're not even through the learning phase
Mhm.
on Meta, Facebook, Instagram,
Mhm.
or Google. Like you're
Mhm.
not even giving it enough time to
Yeah.
come to fruition." And
Yeah.
so part of a thoughtful budget is also saying, how long do I go before I feel like I have enough data to
Mhm.
determine if it's working or not?
Yeah.
And more times
Yeah.
than not, it's 3 to 6 months minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I mean, there's nobody wants to learn if it doesn't work. Let's say you got it wrong. At least if you're designing things properly enough, you can look at it and go, well, we know that doesn't work. So a year from now, whatever, when we try again, we can at least learn the lessons there and make sure we don't repeat them.
Yeah.
That's to me one of the bigger crimes is, well, we tried this. Why don't you think it worked? Yeah, we don't know.
Did you
Damn.
not track or collect any data?
Damn, man. Like we might make the same, like I hope we're not gonna try to, but
Yeah.
oh yeah.
No, I have a client right now. I won't say what market they're in, but he told me I won't do postcards ever again. Well, I ran the analysis. I compared everything he wanted to do, and I in my proposal, postcards was part of it. And I said, you really need to do this with this marketing mix and recommendations that we've come up with. And he said, I won't do it, Jake. I just can't. And
Mhm.
I said, I tell you what, and the data was sound. I said, if you do everything that is in this recommendation,
Mhm.
I will pay you back for the postcard piece. And I've never done that to a client, but I
Mm.
told him, out of my own pocket, I will reimburse you if it doesn't work in the first 90 days.
Mm.
And it was a $6,000 commitment on my part because he had to put 2,000 a month into those postcards.
Mhm.
And at the end of 3 months, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that with the marketing mix, he just
Right.
wasn't doing three of the other things 8 years ago when he tried postcards."
Yeah.
And because we put it all as part of the overall mix and strategy, it
Mhm.
worked. And I didn't have to, I mean, we just finalized that middle of January. And he said, you don't owe me a dime. This is fantastic. It's working. But it was a risk, yes, on my part to extend myself, but
Yeah.
it was also a sound plan that we
Yes.
had. And the
Yes.
data confirmed that he didn't have all the pieces in place to make that postcard work last time.
Right.
But there are other markets that I would have never recommended postcards in.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's part of a plan is planning, right? And when people say marketing mix, they say different marketing tactics that need to work together somehow. It's not just, oh, I'm doing five things, it's going to work. Well, it might work, but if you don't plan, yeah, you're not going to know if it does unless you plan it out that way. Um, so that's what it takes to build a plan, at least the core elements, and therefore a budget, what it takes to make sure that how do you choose what's in it, which influences budget as well. These are the core elements. Jake, is there anything you think we missed? Anything you think we should have just touched on that we didn't get to? We did cover a lot of ground.
No, I think that we covered everything that really, at the end of the day, is going to give you the perfect starting point.
Hmm.
The last piece we talked about on our last episode together, which was managing those leads once you've got the plan and
Yeah.
make sure that you've got the piece and the team in place, the systems in place to nurture those leads.
Hmm.
You know, that's really the next big step. And I tell people this all the time, but before you put somebody on the phones every single day, if you're a good, effective manager, you're tapping that person on the shoulder when they come in, you're looking them in the eye, and you're making sure that they're game face ready.
Hmm.
And if not, tell them to go look in the mirror and give them a checkup from the neck up, and give them a 30-second motivational commercial
Yeah.
to go give themselves that commercial, because uh, how they answer that phone call is going to determine whether or not the ROI is going to come back to you.
Correct. Yes, our previous episode was managing leads is more important than generating them. And when you say it that way, it sounds pretty obvious, but not always. Not always in practice, at least when it's not being looked at. So good point. Where can somebody get started? We just threw a lot of information. We try to boil it down, plan first, then go to market. Where would you recommend somebody get started? This is sort of newer to them.
The first thing that I would do is take advantage of all of the companies out there that'll give a free demo and give
Mhm.
you a free assessment of your
Mhm.
marketing. You can spend a lot of money to have somebody do an assessment. I used to charge a lot of money to do an assessment for people, but now with technology, it's pretty quick.
Mhm.
There's a lot of tools out there. So, if you don't have someone you trust,
Mhm.
who will give you an objective assessment,
Mhm.
you can go to my website, GoatCMO, GOATCMO.com,
Mhm.
submit a form. Feel free to send my team an email, support@goatcmo.com.
Mhm.
Tell them that you listened to this episode,
Mhm.
and we will run you an assessment.
Mhm.
It only takes us, a couple of days turnaround. We'll get on a quick call and give you an overview as a starting point. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of great tools out there.
Yeah.
And even the GPTs of the world, there's some ways that you can learn how to use AI to get
Mhm.
you at least an idea of a plan.
Yeah.
um, but I would say get somebody who knows marketing, who is willing to just shoot straight with you, that you
Yeah.
trust as a starting point.
Yeah.
I think that's where I always start. Is I go to the people I trust, and I ask for them to point me in the right direction.
Mhm. Yeah. And when you're listening to them explain it, you know, even if you don't know a thing about marketing, you can tell when there's bad logic. Ask them why. And usually, I mean, part of the answer has got to be because that's the way people react to these things. And if that sounds reasonable to you, it probably is. It's human behavior. We're all humans. We all behave. So we have some familiarity. Um, go with your gut, get a couple. We do the same thing. We do pretty deep dive assessments on, prospective clients, or other we can give you our 2 cents pretty easily. So yeah, happy to offer that as well. Jake, man, we covered a lot. This has been great. I love talking about marketing with you. So thank you. Thanks for coming back to Practice Care and helping us break down this topic.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to talk through it. I learn more every time, and you ask great questions to make me think outside the box. So thank
Thank
you.
you. I learn as well. I got to see one of these assessments sometime. Couple of points before we wrap up. So Jake gave contact information for him and for his company. Those are going to go into the show notes for his episode. So if you want to get a hold of Jake, you've now got another way to do so. If you haven't subscribed to Practice Care, please do so. Practice Care is one word. We're super easy to find. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, every player, one word. New episode drops every week. That's the easiest way to stay up to date. And finally, if you're like Jake or myself, we serve private practice owners. If you are a private practice owner and you've got some experience on the business side of private practice, you think your colleagues and peers would benefit from, either way, we want you to come on Practice Care. In the show notes for Jake's episode, every episode, there's a link, a couple of questions. It's quick. Just tell us what you want to talk about and we'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. Thanks very much. And until next time.